Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We've got some people rolling in here. Great to see folks. We'll just give people another minute to join as we get rolling here at the top of the hour. While you're waiting, you might just open up your chat window in Zoom, and then there's a click down menu, and make sure that you choose everyone in your chat, just so that everybody can see the conversation as we go through the next 30 minutes. So if you open up your chat window in Zoom, you'll see a little drop down. It probably defaults to hosts and panelists. And if you select everyone, then you'll be able to chat with everyone on the webinar today. And maybe just say hello once you get that going. Maybe tell us where you're coming in from. See what kind of coverage we have around the United States and around the world. You're going to notice me looking off to the side every now and then. That's just me checking in on the chat and seeing what's happening there. I can see Nicole coming in from California. Jesse coming in from Denver. Another California, I see. I will also, full disclosure, tell you the chat is pretty small, so I can't always see people's names, but I can usually see what they're putting in. Jessica, I see you're coming in from Colorado. Kristen's got her coffee, also in from Denver. That's great to see. Ed in Denver. Ed, welcome. Good to see you out there. My name's Julie Williamson. I'm the Chief Growth Enabler at Karrikins Group, and I'm joined here today by a number of my colleagues. We've got Kate kind of behind the scenes helping me out with all of the production that we have here. My colleague Erica is on the chat, so you'll see her popping in every now and then. We've got some other colleagues joining us as well as participants. So just know that we're scattered throughout the crowd. And looking forward to hearing what people have to say, as well as sharing some of our ideas around this idea of leading your strategy and managing your plan. How do you really step into that space and hold those two things as important parts of your growth and enablement as you go forward as leaders? So looking forward to diving into that. We'll give people just another 30 seconds maybe, and then we'll get rolling on the content. I see a few folks joining just now as we kind of come to the top of the hour, or just past the top of the hour. If you're just joining, just a reminder, if you open up your chat window, you want to switch to everyone so that you can join in the conversation, and maybe just say hello out in the chat. Let us know where you're coming in from today. I see Carol out there coming in from Colorado. Oh, Lindsay, I see you coming in from Calgary. Nice to see you out there. Welcome. Glad we've got some Canadian representation here. See Mark in from Denver, another California person. Bailey, nice to see you. All right, well, why don't we get going? We're here today just to have a cup of coffee together, maybe a cup of tea if you're like me and you prefer tea, maybe a Diet Coke, who knows, depends on where you are and what you're doing. But just to join us for 30 minutes to have a conversation about the importance of leading through your strategy and managing to your plan. And I'm just curious, by either a show of hands, you should be able to raise your hand in Zoom, or you can just put yes or no in the chat. How many people out there really love a good plan? What are the planners that we've got on the call here? Who really loves a good plan? I'm checking out the chat to see if anybody chimes in. I see Lindsay raising her hand. Thanks, Lindsay. Who loves a good plan? Yep, Alejandra, yep. Double exclamation point. I love that. Oh, somebody is the opposite. Rhonda, you're the opposite. That's cool. That's cool. We're here for you. The thing about a really good plan is, for some people, it can feel great. Like once you get the plan dialed in, you're like, okay, now I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing. By the way, I'm well known in my family and with my friends for making a project plan for vacation. Anybody ever made a project plan for vacation? I can tell you, Rhonda, for people like you, it goes over like a lead balloon. My friends and family look at me like I have three heads. They're like, we're just on vacation. Why is there a plan? Right? In Excel, yes, Ed, you're my brethren there. I love that. Kristen's definitely done that. I think this idea of having a plan, for me at least, helps me to feel like I'm in control. It feels good. I feel like I know where we're going. And now great things can happen because we have a really good plan. The challenge with this planning mentality, as we like to say at Karrikins Group, is that a plan without a strategy is potential untapped. One of the challenges of going deep into planning without knowing what your strategic goals and objectives are is you can leave a lot of potential out on the table. And for good planners like myself, that's actually a caution, right? We have to really think about what are the opportunities that we want to explore before we dive into making a really great plan. But a great plan just feels so good. It's really alluring. Like you really want to go there. However, the thing about a great strategy, if you're a strategy minded person, is that a strategy without a plan is potential untapped. Or excuse me, is ambition unrealized. A strategy without a plan is ambition unrealized. You can have the greatest ideas, the biggest objectives, the grandest goals, but if you don't have a good plan to support them, then you're not going to get to the ambition that you want to see. And that's why having both a strategy and a plan is really important as you lead your company or your team forward, especially through times of transformation, especially if you have big goals that you want to reach or that you've been given and you've been challenged to reach and you want to move towards those. Knowing what your strategy is and also what your plan is absolutely critically important. Here's the challenge, though, is often what happens in business is we wind up in this weird amalgamation of strategy and plan, and we like to call it a strategic plan. Anybody out there have a great strategic plan? Kristen, I see you've definitely done that. Yeah, I have too. Anybody think about a strategic plan as something that you really kind of hold on to? Here's the thing, the reason I raise strategic plans is because we see them all the time in the work that we do with our clients. And strategic plans, I'm not here to debate whether you should or shouldn't have a strategic plan. Maybe you're a strategic planner and it's in your title and you love that and it's your job and that's awesome. That's great. My caution about strategic plans, especially if you're a planner, is that in my experience, strategic plans are 9 parts plan and 1 part strategy. We mush together the ideas of strategy and planning, and we call it a strategic plan, but it tends to lean towards planning. It looks a lot like a great plan. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Here's one, is that the definitions of strategy and plan are sometimes difficult to pin down. Most people know what a good plan is. If I asked all of you to just jot down on a sticky note, what are the 5 or 6 elements of a great plan, you would probably come up with pretty similar lists. You would have things like tasks, dates, dependencies, levels of effort, cost, resource allocation, all of these different things. And those are pretty standard. So people know what goes in a good plan. When you ask people to write down what are the elements of a good strategy, you get all sorts of different answers. People are all over the map with what is a really good strategy, because a strategy typically needs a modifier. A corporate strategy looks different from an HR strategy, which looks different from a finance strategy, which looks different from a go-to-market strategy. It's also culturally informed. What a strategy is might depend on how your company has traditionally done strategy work. And so it's hard to know if you have a good strategy because it might look very different from what other people are calling strategy or doing as strategy. So we wind up in this space of strategic planning or a strategic plan that's a combination of your strategy and your plan, but it's mostly a plan. And that can be a real challenge if you have ambitious goals that you need to hit. Let's take an example, a real world example that a lot of people are familiar with. Let's just take a quick dive into Southwest Airlines. How many of you have flown Southwest Airlines? Just a quick show of hands. Anybody out there? I mean, I love Southwest, by the way. We're in Denver, so we're in their market. We're kind of in their sweet spot. Great airline. All the airlines have different, moments where they get bad press, but for the most part, my experience with Southwest is they're super solid. We go all the way back to the 1970s when Herb Keeler and Roland King were creating Southwest Airlines. Let's just take a moment and remember how they came to market. Southwest decided that they would be able to fly point to point, short distances, and they could convince the masses to get on planes and fly places that they normally were taking a Greyhound bus. So Southwest launched in Texas, and they were flying between San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas. And they needed to hit a price point that would allow people to go and get on a plane instead of getting on a bus to go from point A to point B. In order to do that, they needed a clear strategy for getting into the market. And that strategy involved operational simplicity that would drive the cost out of the business such that they could compete with a Greyhound bus ticket to go from those cities. They also committed to point flights, and they made a clear commitment in their operational simplicity that they would fly one plane and one plane only. Does anybody know what that plane is? They still hold to that today, by the way, one plane and one plane only. Anybody know what the plane is at Southwest flies. Yep, the 737, exactly. Got a couple of people out there. So this, if you are on a Southwest flight, you are on a 737. Now, these days, 30 years later, 40 years later, there are variations in the version of the 737, but they fly one plane and one plane only, and that is the 737. And that's because their strategy, a key pillar of their strategy, is operational simplicity. So what does operational simplicity do for you strategically? It means you only need one kind of pilot, one kind of flight attendant, one kind of gate, one set of spare parts, one type of mechanic, one type of baggage handling system, right? Everything gets easier when you fly one plane and one plane only. Now, there are competitors in the market, TWA, Pan Am, US Air, who, by the way, none of whom are still in business. We're catering to a much different audience in the market. So strategically, they were differentiated because they were going after the mid market in plane travel. Really, in the 70s and 80s, people were going after people who had more money to spend and were flying further distances. But Southwest said, we're going to go after everyone who might want to go from point A to point B. And we're going to do that by keeping the cost down. Now, I want you to just imagine for me that it's the early 1980s. So early 1980s, and let's say you're in Denver. I see we've got a lot of people in Denver when I check in on the chat. If you're in Denver in the early 1980s and you've been tasked by Southwest, you work with Southwest and you've been tasked by them to open the Denver market. You're going to go to market in Denver, and let's say it's I don't know, July, and you want to get there by December in time for the ski season holidays, because that's a big time in the Denver market. You know, you can attract a lot of people. So what do? You make a plan, right? And I'll bet you've got the best plan in the world. You've got all sorts of lines and rows in your Excel spreadsheet, for those of you who said you do it in Excel, and you know exactly who needs to do what when. You've got your budget set, you're on fire. Everything's working really, really well, and you're going to make that December deadline. Now, imagine one of your colleagues comes to the door and they knock on the door and they say, hey, boss, I've got bad news for you. That 737 that we need to open the Denver market, I just heard from Boeing and it's going to be delayed by 3 months. So we're going to miss our dates. And your heart sinks and you think to yourself, my plan just took a punch in the face, as Mike Tyson used to say, if you everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? But you sit there and you think, what are we going to do? And then your colleague says, but hey, boss, I've got a solution. And you think, oh my gosh, thank goodness I hired the right people, right? You come with problems, they come with solutions. And you say, tell me what it is. What's the solution? And your colleague says, well, I just got a call from Airbus and they're rolling a new Airbus A320 off the line next week, and they can have it here in a month. And then we'll be back on schedule. And the good news is Airbus, by the way, in the 1980s was just coming to market with that plane, competitor to the 737. And they say, well, they're even going to give us a discount on it. So we're going to be under budget. We're going to be back on time. Things are looking good. It's awesome. If you are only focused on your plan, then you say yes to that Airbus 320. You say, yep, get me the 320. We're going to get back on schedule. We're going to get back on budget. We're going to hit that ski season traffic, right? So if you're managing to your plan only and you don't have the strategy in mind, then you're going to say yes to that. And you're going to take out operational simplicity and you're going to introduce complexity that has long-term impacts on the company as a whole. However, if you're leading through your strategy, if you go back to the strategy and you say, one of our core tenets of our strategy is operational simplicity, and we're doing that so we differentiate from the market so that we can drive the price point that we need, so that we can compete with that Greyhound bus ticket. And that means, as painful as it is, we have to say no to that solution of the Airbus 320, and we need to stay committed to the 737. And we're going to take the hit in the short term in the plan in order to stay strategically aligned. That right there is the difference between leading your strategy and managing your plan. And the reality is that you have to do both all the time in business. You're constantly making those trade-offs. But if you've smushed together your strategy and your plan into a strategic plan that is 9 parts plan and 1 part strategy, you can miss those trade-offs. You can miss those opportunities to think about, how do I stay strategically aligned during this difficult moment that has big implications for the plan? And that's why we always encourage people to have space between their strategy and their plan. By having constructive space between your strategy and your plan, you can use your strategy to make decisions about your plan. And that's where the magic happens. That's where you start to really realize the potential of your strategy and your plan. They come together and work together to help you move towards your most ambitious goals. But they need to be two different things. And that's why we talk a lot about what's your strategy versus what's your plan. So here's a question that I have for you. How many of you feel like, on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe, you could really clearly articulate your company or your team's strategy, maybe in 3 or 4 bullet points like we've done here for Southwest? So just on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I couldn't do it at all, and 10 being absolutely, I know exactly what those 3 or 4 bullet points are. I see 8 out there. Rhonda, thank you for that. Anyone else have just a scale of 1 to 10? A 6 from Mark. Yep. A 6. Yep. Got some others rolling in. I think the challenge with that, your old company 4. Yeah. And I think that's one of the challenges with strategy and leading through your strategy is it can feel really ambiguous. It can feel like, what exactly is that strategy? But the plans feel really solid, right? So when we go, for example, into status reports, we report on the plan typically, rather than the strategy, or we report on the strategic plan, right? Which again, 9 parts plan, 1 part strategy, because it can feel hard to really understand or explain what's happening in the strategy. So part of it is, I think we overcomplicate strategy sometimes. Strategy needs a lot of heavy lifting behind the scenes. You have to do a lot of research sometimes. You have to really understand what's it going to take to differentiate in the market. What do the customers want? Where are we going? Where are we headed? But at the end of the day, your strategy should be distilled enough that people can understand it and can use it to make decisions about their plan. Just like in the example of Southwest, where we say, well, are we going to take an impact to the plan, or are we going to introduce complexity into the system when we've committed to operational simplicity and solve the plan problems for today? What the space between strategy and planning lets you do is it lets you hold that long-term view, right? It keeps you going towards those ambitious goals rather than just solving for today. And that's where a lot of times companies get kind of jammed up around strategy, because they forget that they need to hold that space and they need to keep using it to make decisions about where they're going and how they're getting there. And instead, they solve plan problems in the near term. So how many of you, by the way, feel like sometimes there's real tension between, are we making long-term decisions or short-term decisions? Anyone out there having that interesting challenge between long-term and short-term? Yes, Lindsay, exactly. I think this is where the problem sits. When the focus is on plans, and you don't have a distinction between what's the strategy that we're pursuing with that plan, it makes it really easy to stay in that short-term mindset and just make decisions that solve for the plan. When we think about what strategy should do for you, it should make a claim about what's possible. A strategy, by the way, is a theory. It's about what could happen. If you think about Southwest and Herb and Roland, they had a theory. They believed that they could attract the masses to get on a plane in the 1970s, which, by the way, was not that typical, right? Not everybody was flying every day in the 1970s. They believed that they could attract that market and convince people to get off the Greyhound bus and onto a jet plane. I know it's hard to believe in 2023 that that was a challenge, right? But that was a theory that they had. They couldn't prove it. They did obviously a lot of market research. They believed in it, but they couldn't prove that that would happen. But their strategy said, we think we can deliver on that ambition if we hit the right price point. And we hit that price point by being fully committed to operational simplicity. And that means we fly 1 plane and 1 plane only. That gives you a decision-making framework for making decisions about any plan impacts in any market. And I would really encourage you, as you think about what are you doing with your strategy for your company or for your team, is it distilled to a point where people can actually make decisions based on the strategy and then drive the plan out of those decisions rather than the other way around, rather than having a plan and being fully committed to plan success at the expense of what the strategy is? because that's where you really start to get into putting energy behind and fueling ambitious goals. It's a really exciting place. Yeah, and I see, Ed, your comment about especially in publicly traded companies. In publicly traded companies, absolutely. You get very fixated on especially the quarterly plan, right? We have to make our quarterly numbers, but your strategy often is out 2 or 3 years. And again, to me, it comes down to, do you have a good framework for understanding and articulating the strategy so that you can explain plan impacting decisions through the lens of the strategy? What we often see, by the way, when there are plan impacting decisions is people come in and talk about plan related levers. So they talk about budget, capacity, whether or not it's been successful, the plan is on track, whether there are dependencies that are creating problems, but they don't ladder it back up into the perspective of, here are the strategic implications for what we're doing and the decisions that we're making about the plan. By framing things through the lens of the strategic implications, it makes it much easier at an executive and a board level to be able to understand why the plan impacts are what they are, and maybe why the plan needs to change. Instead, what we see often happening is the strategy changes to accommodate things that are happening to the plan, and that lets you hit your quarterly numbers. But it doesn't let you reach your best ambitions about what's possible in the market. And that's where we really want to go, is how do we lean into what's possible? And what happens often is people don't ask some really basic questions about what do I want to answer in my strategy? And so these 5 questions are just sort of helpful for you as you think about, what do I want to include in my strategy? Think about, does your strategy answer the question, what outcomes are theoretically possible? What could happen? And how is that different from what's happening today, either within the organization or more broadly in the market? Either way, your strategy should be different. You should have a strategy that says we want to be different from how we are today. And then why would people want to do what we're doing? Why would people want to get on a plane instead of a Greyhound bus, right? So think about it through that lens. And then the final question that I have here is, can we promise to deliver on this strategy? And by the way, the answer to that last question really should be no. If the answer to that last question is yes, then you've probably dropped down into planning. You've probably dropped down into things that you feel like you can make happen no matter what. But a strategy is about an ambition. It's about a theory that things could be different, that you could be doing things differently. And in that space, there is uncertainty. And that uncertainty can feel really uncomfortable for people. But that uncertainty is where the magic lies. The uncertainty is where growth is. The uncertainty is where potential lives. And so if you really want to lean into ambitious goals and then fulfill that potential, you have to state that in your strategy as something that may or may not happen. Now, then you go out and you create a plan that absolutely will drive towards success. But the strategy should push you beyond that. The strategy should push you beyond what's possible, what's guaranteed, what feels really comfortable, and should move into that area of uncertainty. We don't know if we can do it or not, but we believe in it and we believe it's possible. Southwest certainly was able to fulfill their potential when it comes to convincing people to get on a plane to fly short distances. And obviously they've gone far beyond that strategy these days. One of the challenges that we see all the time in the work that we do is what we call the strategy in the drawer syndrome. Anybody ever experienced this? So we do a great strategy and we see some amazing strategies. We see huge potential, great ideas. People want to see big things happen for their organizations, for their teams, whatever it might be. And they spend a lot of money and a lot of time on the strategy. And then what happens? It goes in the drawer. And when it goes in the drawer, it's no longer being used to make decisions about plan impacting events. And that's where you lose all of the great ambition that the strategy holds. By keeping it front and center and by having leader engagement and energy across the board as you're moving forward, then you start to really fuel the ambition that's in the strategy instead of just delivering on the plan. Because if you just get locked into delivering on the plan, you might make that mistake of saying yes to the Airbus 320 and introducing complexity where you don't need it, if your strategy depends on operational simplicity. Now, I know you can't maintain a huge focus on strategy every single day as a leader, because you do have to get things done. You got to get the plan delivered. You got to lean in. You got to make that happen. But what I would suggest is over time, you need to keep coming back to the strategy. You need to keep checking in with it. You need to say, are we staying true to the strategy? Are we moving towards the ambitions that we've set out there? And by keeping leader engagement around it continuously as you go forward, you will find that you fuel the plan in a whole different way. And you start orienting towards the plan differently when you look at it through the lens of strategy on a regular basis as a leader. But again, you can only do that if your strategy and your plan are two different things. And your strategy provides the framework for making decisions about the plan and the progress that that's happening with it. And by keeping that healthy space there, you can maintain leader energy around what is it that we're trying to do and how do we fulfill that potential with our plan while also staying true to our ambitious goals. And I would just really recommend as you go forward that you just be aware, just be cautious of what we call the adorable Labradorka who masquerades as a strategic plan. And again, if you do strategic planning, that's awesome. I love that. I'm not here to debate the label or what it is or what it isn't. I would just caution you that if all you have is a strategic plan and you don't have a distinctly separate strategy that helps you to make decisions about it, you may be missing opportunity. You may be missing the ambitious goals that a strategy can set for you, and you're trading off a plan that feels really good, that feels like you can execute, and that helps you to fulfill the potential. But if you have that strategy framework that lets you make decisions about your plan, then I think you'll find that you move much faster towards much bigger goals as you go forward. So think about holding that space and check yourself in your own organization or for your team. And again, corporate strategy looks different from HR strategy or from go-to-market strategy or from a sales strategy or from a vacation strategy, by the way. I don't know that any of my friends and family want me to sit down and have a strategy session with them about what should we be doing on our vacation, but I'm still going to make my plans. So it doesn't always work. But I do think that if you just do a click down for yourself in your own organization and ask, is our strategy articulate and clear enough that we can make decisions about our plans based on where we want to go and based on what our ambitious goals are? Then you will find that it starts to shift the energy in your organization and in your team about what it means to lead towards a strategy while also doing the very real work of managing to your plan. Hopefully that gives you a couple of ideas. And I will tell you this about strategy as one final thought. We're just almost at the bottom of the hour, which is hard to believe. Time just flies by on these coffee breaks. But I wish I had some fairy dust. I wish I could just make strategy easy and straightforward and something that people, that feels really concrete. But at the end of the day, for strategy, you have to embrace the uncertainty. You have to lean in and understand that it is a theory about what's possible. It's not a guarantee about where you're going. Your plan is there to help fortify the strategy. It helps you to bring it down from that theoretical area and say, here's what we're going to do. But don't get so fixated on the plan that you lose sight of those ambitious goals. Use your strategy to make decisions about plan impacting events, which are inevitable and will always happen. I hope that gives you some ideas. I hope it's been a good coffee break for you. Hopefully you've gotten a little caffeine in you over this time. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here. I really enjoyed it. If you have any questions, if you'd like to follow up, please feel free to reach out to us at hello@karrikinsgroup.com. And hopefully we'll see you out there doing some great strategy work. Have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. We'll see you soon.